If you're winning in practice, you're going to lose when it matters. But if you learn to fail fast behind closed doors and you take fast feedback, when you step on the line, you will win.
Justin Kavanaugh, better known as Coach Cav. He's a high-performance coach for both sport and business. He's a 6-time Olympic coach who's trained pros in the NFL, MLB, and UFC. On top of advising entrepreneurs and executives, he's also the CEO of Athlete HQ and Sites at Scale and hosts the Coach's Room podcast.
I've got 8 skills coach's voice. I've got my agent's voice. I've got my head coach's voice, my assistants. It's gotten so insane in that way. What have you found is important in order to be able to chase that greatness that maybe you need to manage for yourself with those voices?
You just have to learn to mute the people that are not in your corner. I think the world listens to losers, and losing doesn't give you anything in life. There's no momentum in losing. I am agnostic to the process, but I'm religious to results. I've never sat in a room in a boardroom and be like, hey, we are going to take this kid because he sucks at this thing. So why the hell is it in your head?
What are those qualities that you look for in the kind of coach that you want to work with? Because I'm sure we're very specific towards that as well. Welcome back to the Evolving Athletes podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest. Not because he's Justin Kavanaugh, let's be honest, Coach Cav is the man, but because this one's a little more personal for me. Justin has become a mentor, friend, and a coach in my own journey, and that what makes this conversation special is that he embodies exactly what we talk about on this podcast, the idea of staying an evolving athlete throughout your life. He's achieved things at such a young age that most people spend a lifetime chasing, and he's done it in a way that's unique, intentional, and worth learning from. So I can't wait to dive in, pull out some of that wisdom, and share it with you all. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, beauty, brother. So, before we dive into the deeper stuff, I'd love for you to set the stage a bit, for our listeners. You said it's such a unique, path along the way, multi-sport athlete, starting your first business while you were in school, now working with Olympians, pro athletes, coaches around the world. Can you give just a quick snapshot of that journey, just so people know, right, the lens and framework that you're coming from as we get into this conversation?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I'll start with the fact that, my mom's a teacher, my dad's a firefighter. I grew up in a hardworking family. I'm a big believer of, there's a quote by one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, Pat Riley. It said, hard work never guaranteed anything, but without it, you don't have a chance. And I truly believe that. I'm a big believer of that hard work is the thing that's going to get you into that kind of lucky line, where if you put your time in, it's going to happen. Now, you could grind your way into success, or you could collapse time by being around mentors and other people. And I was very fortunate to be around some amazing people in my life that collapsed time for me. And I always sought that out. That was kind of my jam. I sought it out, and I looked at that as an option. So I think that one of the biggest risks that I had in my coaching career is I started at the top. I had friends that were training with me. I was a 5-sport athlete, fortunate enough to have a lot of success and be an All-American. And they trusted me with their journey. Now, they happened to be athletes that were high-level professionals. And they said, hey, I trust you. So when I got that opportunity, I took it and I started to work with them. Now, the interesting thing about that is probably the riskiest place to start, and it's where everyone wants to end up. So if you're a coach, you're like, I want to work with pros. I want to work with Olympians. And it's like, when you get that opportunity, you're like, oh crap, now I'm here. Now everything matters. So, but I learned something from that, which is number one is that all relationships start and end with trust. Number one. And number two, that I do better when there's high stakes. I like to have skin in the game, and that's what keeps it going. When things get boring for me, it's because there's not enough skin in the game. And I've always I started at the top, and I've stayed at the top. 6 Olympic cycles now, from Athens all the way to Paris. We've been able to medal every Olympic cycle. Been in pro sports for over 20 years. And I still love it. I think the day that I am not nervous when my athlete's on the line is the day I'll stop coaching. Because that means that it's not there, So that's kind of my background. And I've been able to take the lessons that I've learned both as an athlete and as a coach towards business and life, and really just kind of drive my mission forward, which is to live a life of higher purpose.
Yeah, amen to that. That's what I love. That's so unique on your lens, and that's what I'm looking forward to getting into the discussion. Right, is that business and life part? Because I know that's one of the biggest challenges I see in dealing in the pro realm. Right, of how much we don't take into effect, like performance world. It's so much about your sport, and that's okay. I got to stay dialed in, and you see so many athletes at that level are just so dialed on the process and what needs to happen, where they don't take in the rest of the breadth of like, well, wait a second, I'm managing a life, a lifestyle. So this is this is an ingredient, but that's one of the things that I'm super pumped to dive into with you, where it's incredible what you've done and how you've just created that cohesive unit across the board, right, in your own process with this.
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate you saying that, but I'll be honest about one thing that I think a lot of people miss is there's a statement that I love Japanese philosophy and history. I think it's a very rich country, and I really, I love going there. It's something that I do like every year as like something that's really important to me to kind of find my space. But there's a concept in Japan, which is how you do one thing is how you do everything. And you hear that a lot with how you show up, and you hear that a lot within business and in life and in sport. And I could not be a better example that that is so far from the truth than anything else that I do. Because the truth is my wife will tell you, like, you look at my car, you look at my house, when you look at my gym, or if you look at my consistency in my daily schedule versus if you look at my schedule when I am training and competing, they could not be further from that level of an alignment. When I am like training for a camp, I mean, to the second, everything is dialed in.
Right.
I could tell you like how much I need to eat, what grain of rice that I need to have when I'm competing. But when I'm off, I am way off. And when I'm playing my sport or I'm competing or I'm coaching, I mean, everything is dialed in. I believe in, as a coach, like, leave no stone left unturned.
Yeah.
But in another area of my life, my house, my car, it's disorganized. It's not dialed in. It's not perfect.
Right.
And my wife will constantly remind me, like, hey, if this was your gym, like, where would that go? Like, well, everything has to have a place.
Right.
And I don't have that level of, complete synergy where how I do one thing is how I do everything. I'm extremely meticulous. I am very OCD. I like things to be in a certain way. But then in this other part of my world, I am the most like laissez-faire, chill individual. Like, nothing's going to bother me when I'm on vacation. Like, it's not going to bother. But if that person just gave me a little bit of a slight attitude while I was in a coaching space, well, I would lean up and have a different conversation with them.
Exactly.
So everything is different. I don't believe that you could operate the same way in every environment because it's just too exhausting. That's a very stressful environment. And I think you got to manage stress. I think as coaches, we're actually stress managers is what we do best. And you have to know, where do you need to put that? It's kind of like, you could win the battle, but you got to be able to, look at the whole picture of the war. Right. And I think of like the war on your life, right?
Yeah.
As a matter of strategic priorities. And where's my priorities? That allows me to have balance.
Yeah. I love how you lay that out. So it's funny. I was having dinner with my wife, Marissa, the other night, and we had talked about this exact thing of like how she's like, oh, when it comes to like training stuff or anything to do that's performance related, you're like Rain Man, you're dialed in. But when it comes to our life stuff, I can see the glossiness. I'm asking you about what should we do here on this day with the kids? Where should we go? And I could just tell you are completely checked out. And it's funny when you bring that up of like, and you hit the nail on the head. And it's funny to hear that quote comes from how you do anything. I do everything's from Japan, but it's, I think that's the part that a lot of us as high performers forget, is that there's something to that as well that is organized in its own way. So even though it feels unorganized, I think as an athlete, like the argument you always make with flow state is that flow state isn't this thing that I'm always thinking about how to be in flow state. Flow state is more like, I found my natural ability because I've done it so many times that I now know how to turn off certain mechanisms and just go and flow and play. And I think that's the part where we get misconstrued a lot with exactly what you said of, there has to be places where you can turn it off, but more importantly, you recognize where you turn it off. That's what I love about what you just said is you actually know where it went off and where, like, no, I don't, that part, I don't have space. There's no, that's it. I'm chilling when it comes to a lot of different parts of my life. And that in and of itself is a beautiful thing as a high performer, to like recognize that and to know I'm laid back. I don't care about that stuff. I care about it with family. I'll help out, of course, but it's not going to occupy cognitively the way I dial in when I'm performing and things of that nature.
I find that it can be quite exhausting if you have to be like that all the time. I mean, I would much prefer to leverage my energy to an area of performance that has an impact in the other things. Where is the domino effect? And you want to create that first domino and knock that off and be like, all right, cool. It cascades into the rest of the area. In the other side of things, if you were to look at it like everything I have to operate, I have to be on point with everything, like that's exhausting. And there's a lot of anxiety if you don't show up a certain way. Whereas I tend to be like, hey, I'm going to be the best at what I do in the area of what I do. I stay in my lane. And if I learn to stay in my lane, then people start to appreciate me for the greatness in which I'm able to create, and there's we have a concept, which is greatness is very rare. Most people don't realize how rare it is. And I tell people, it's like, hey, I don't chase greatness. Greatness chases me. Because I want to, like, in that area. But in the area of probably my organization of my household, my bills, my other sort of things, it's like, I ain't anywhere close to greatness in that space. But I will tell you what, you put me you put me in an environment where you need to win, and we're going to win.
Yeah. Exactly.
So understand your zone of genius, stay in that space, build a model that basically allows you to do what you do best. And then you have to respect the fact that if you're not in a position in your life that the other areas are taken care of, then it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, you need to do that so that you can do the next thing. I'm fortunate enough to have a life partner that is so good, like the yin to my yang in another area of my life, so that I could do what I do best. But if you don't have that, then yeah, you have your adult responsibilities in life that are required, and you can't just forget about them over time. I tend to, because I'm lucky enough to have somebody in my world that does that for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Amen. Ditto. Very lucky, I feel you on that, brother. We'll definitely dive more into. I love where you just went with it from the greatness aspect. There's a lot to unravel there. Before we move on, I want to talk more about, right, the one thing we always want to kind of understand as an evolving athlete is where we kind of come from. And what I love is so unique. There's some really cool parts about your identity that I'd love to dig into for our listeners to understand, because these are kind of common situations, if you will, where as you're coming up as a high performer, as somebody that is chasing greatness, well, I think these are things that are interesting to align with in your own story. So, you grew up competing, right, at a really high level across football, wrestling, track and field, and junior Olympic decathlon, which was fascinating, right, across the board. So each of those sports had its own culture, values, and way of shaping athletes. Looking back, what did it feel like for you to grow up moving through those different cultures, and how did those experiences shape how you became as a young athlete and person?
Well, I think that there's a lot of value to the role that you play within a team, and you learn from the dynamic of a team of how you're doing. And there's some things that are out of your control. For instance, in the sport of football, if you're an offensive lineman, you don't get a lot of credit, but if you miss a block, you're going to get the camera on you for the wrong reason. And there's a reason for that, which is you're going to put greater level of risk to someone else. So if I miss a block as an offensive lineman and I don't even hit my assignment, there's a chance that the running back or the ball carrier is going to get hurt because of something I did wrong. That sense of ownership is really important in the role of your position. And you only learn that when you're in an environment where you are not bigger than the team. And that the team starts to understand, like, hey, where are you strong? Where do you need to support you? On the other side of that is the individual sports. So whether it be track and field or wrestling or fighting, for example, is you could say whatever you want about missing a block or fumbling or missing a tackle or actually making a big hit or scoring a touchdown. But the truth is that if I win in wrestling, it's I own it. Like there's no one, like the coach isn't going there and jumping in on the mat. There's no WWE tag, you're it, and then you jump in and you help you out. In track and field, not including the relays, it's an individual sport, and it's either I was better than that guy today or that guy beat me. And you know that. So there's a level of accountability to a self-assessment that is really valuable. And I think that there is a lot of benefits of being in a team environment, but also being an individual competitive sport so that whereas in the team environment, the eye in the sky never lies. I have a feeling while I was in the game where my perception was one thing and I had the depth and I feel the athlete on this end. But then if I watch the film, it says something else.
Yes.
And it's like, hey, that's going to tell me a better story than the story that I felt, because feelings lie to you a little bit. But on the individual side, you take full responsibility to the outcome. And there's no other external outcomes. The external outcome was the competitor, is as you're running against that person, the anxiety and stress that goes with it, the conditions are even across the board. Or if it's in a wrestling match, you're attached to that other person coming at you. And it's all basically this kind of cat and mouse game. So I think that there's massive benefits to being in both of those environments and getting an evaluation of, well, I can't make it up and say I was good today. Well, did I win or did I lose? And that to me is super important, because oftentimes people are looking for validation in the wrong areas. They're looking for validation within their parents, they're in their friend groups or in their teammates. And socially, that's really important. But what you really should be looking at is validation of, are you doing the right thing? Are you making progress? Are you comfortable going to bed at night knowing that you did your best? That's really important. And I think that sports teach those lessons on a regular basis and in different ways.
Bingo. Well, and I love how you just explained naturally something that we always talk about with our athletes. We'll call it the duality of hockey, or duality of soccer, whatever team sport we play. And what we lay out is there's the me versus we. That's the tension, the gap that goes on, is there's your interpretation of it, and then there's our interpretation of it. And that's what we're battling with, is in a team environment, you have to understand there's your interpretation, which is just as important as the team's, but one is not more important than the other. And you have to understand how to balance the two out. I think that's something culture that we're dealing with now, is there's so much of this way towards me and what I think. And it's like, well, are you considering what the organization, the team, what others around you, your teammates, line mates, things of that nature as well? And there's a real imbalance with that. And what you just described is exactly where, if you went through an individual sport and you understood the context of a different way of seeing, of like, oh, I'm learning both at the same time. I'm learning how to deal with it on my own. Here's what it feels like. Here's the conditions of, on my own, I've got to figure this out. Versus in a team environment, seeing that lens at a young age allows you to go, oh, I'm here. Okay, so now the me versus we concept, or the duality, is easy to recognize, because you can go, oh, okay, I understand. Oh, in this situation, yeah, it's about just like this. If I was just doing wrestling, okay, cool. But in this one, oh, it's like as if I was playing basketball. Or like, you're able to compartmentalize it a lot easier when you're younger, as opposed to now. A lot of people dial in on their one team sport, and they don't get enough of that ability to go experience something on their own, to be able to say like, oh, okay, I understand from the coach's perspective. I understand from my teammates' perspective. Like, I'm understanding I'm a part of a cohesive collective unit, as opposed to, no, it's about me on your team, and I've got to be an all-star and I've got to be everything. And it's interesting how that imbalance gets kind of created with all the voices.
Absolutely. And I think what's really cool about sports is, like everybody is chasing progress in life. I know that you're always trying to get, like, I want to have an award. I want to win. I want to have these level of achievements. But in reality, what most people are searching for is their own human limit, and they're trying to develop progress. I think you could clearly assess someone's progress directly correlated to their mood. It's like, if they could start to realize like how how much they've grown, they could start to realize like how happy they are or how satisfied they are with the work that they're putting. People will continue to do the things that they're getting rewarded in, and then that just kind of feeds it. It also perpetuates a problem too. Whereas if I'm not getting any sort of outcome that I feel like is good, I start to like stop doing that work. And this is why I think it's really important from a coaching perspective to communicate to athletes that they are growing and they are making progress. And here's why: you just don't know it yet because you've put in the time in and you're not aware of it. It's like, I'm being hard on you for this reason. And the reason why that is really important is because it's really difficult to read the label from inside the jar. When people, they lose the forest within the trees, they get all lost because they're too deep into it. I think it's important to have a trusted source of feedback from a coaching perspective to say, hey, here's what you're missing. Here's what I'm seeing. This is a perspective. I tell everybody in coaching, you need three things. Number one is you need perspective. I mean, I've been well recognized globally for my coaching. I work with the fastest athletes in sport, whether it be at the Olympic 100-meter sprinters to, team sports that move pretty quickly. I have to see things in real time fast, and I develop a coaching eye, but the way that you do that is through perspective. You're able to look at angles, and there's this kind of, there's a depth perception issue, but there's also like something is true from different angles as well. And the second thing is, after you have perspective, you need attention. If the athlete is not going to listen to you and they don't give you their eyes and ears and they're not going to believe that you could help them, then you have no attention. So you have to be loud enough, but clear enough that they're going to pay attention to you. And then the last thing is direction. As a coach, you're almost giving confidence to the player as you're communicating. And are you communicating in a way that is, I believe you could do this because I've seen you do it before, or I believe you could do this because this is what I need you to do, and you're going to be in that role and you're going to make it happen? Whatever that is, you got to be able to give clear communication and clear direction so that they leave that 1 minute with the coach and go, okay, I know what to do now. I know what he wants. I understand the expectation. And that is really important. So those are the three things that I think every coach needs to do, which is develop perspective, have attention from the athlete, so you hold authority in space, and then give clear direction, because coaching is this like quick, constant feedback loop. And your job is to make quick iterations before it comes back to like create bigger insecurities in the athlete. Your job is to coach the thing that the athlete doesn't see yet. And you're protecting them from themselves more often than you're protecting them from the environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I hope any coaches, leaders listening to that framework, spot on of that's something individually as a leader that you can capture, that you can utilize for yourself and pay attention to, right? How is my perspective? Am I getting the attention, right? Am I being clear? Like, those are easy ways to basically assess yourself in that process as a leader, which is super important. And, again, we'll drive into that as well, but you hit something else that's really important of your identity coming up. And I'd love for you to, when you look back of another issue we deal with in today's world with the voices, right? That's a great framework for a coach to be able to say, yep, awesome. Okay, I can now assess myself. But what do you say to now, right? As a multi-sport athlete, you're surrounded by a lot of different coaches, voices coming up, right? Each with their own philosophy, style. And even though it's different sports, there's that aspect for you where you were able to go under the conditions and understand for yourself. But did you find yourself managing all those voices in any kind of way, right? Were they aligned, or do they sometimes pull you in different directions? And how did navigating those perspectives shape the way you learned and competed as you moved on? Because that is one of the biggest challenges I think most leaders deal with today. Is it's not just my voice anymore. It's my parents' voice. I've got 8 skills coaches' voice. I've got my agent's voice. I've got, my head coach's voice, my assistants. I've got social media's voice. Like, it's gotten so insane in that way. So for you, was there anything that as you were coming up, was there that pull that kind of you were managing, or just in general, what have you found is important in order to be able to chase that greatness that maybe you need to manage for yourself with those voices?
Yeah. So like managing voices is a trained skill. And the first trained skill is to be able to know and decide who you're going to listen to. So I would say like first aspect of that is your voice in your own head. Because if you don't have a clear communication with yourself, then anything that someone says, you're going to tend to believe. You got to have some sort of anchor point that, like, I know how I am. And that's why game film is really important. The eye in the sky never lies. That's why practice and repetition and understanding skill acquisition and getting to a level of mastery or at least comfort within, like, I know where my own ranges is really important. So I think that the first aspect of it is knowing oneself. This is like level of awareness, and having a way to kind of gauge that in reality, not just being like, I know I'm the greatest, like just saying it for that sake, but actually understanding like how good you actually are. The second thing is developing like a coach's or an athlete ear is what I would call it. So an athlete ear is, and this is the importance of playing team sports and individual sports, because we talked about that first thing that a coach needs to have, which is perspective. When you're on the field, your on-field perspective as a player is looking at something north-south. And I'm basically taking something on from one goal to the other goal, from one end line to the other end line, right? And I see the field in a different way. Things are moving to me lateral and they're coming at me, changing the depth. And that's the athlete view. The coach's view on the sideline is one in which it's parallel. So the depth is going this way, but you really don't see above it, right? You don't have that kind of sky view coach's box perspective. And that then there's a communication between the coach's box to the sideline to the field. So that immediately is like trying to give you this quick feedback loop of perspective and a level of awareness. And I think you need to understand that so that you know who to listen to, when to listen to them. So if you're a player, when you're on the ice or you're on the field and you're getting coaching from the side, it's like, hey, they may be telling you something to look out for because they see something that you don't see, but they also see something that may be blocked by something that you see. So you have to know that. You're like, I understand what you're saying, coach, and you can't look at him. So you can't turn your head while you're working because you lose your greatest asset, which is feel and sight. So if you're playing, you got to have field vision. And if you don't have field vision because you're distracted by a word or a coach yelling at you, then you've diminished your ability to see what's actually going on. So it's first off is like, do you understand that there's depths that are coming in from different angles and different voices and how to relay that information appropriately? So that's on field, sideline, and then coach's box. So those are the three kind of area perspectives that are happening in real time while you're playing. The second part is developing an athlete ear, which is while I am wrestling, I can't look at my coach because that immediately is going to turn my head. Wherever your eyes go, your head go. Wherever your head's going to go, your body's going to follow.
Yeah.
So in the technical competition, if my eyes go to my coach, then my body's going to follow because my head's going there. And that's probably not really good for what you're trying to accomplish as a coach, as an athlete. Yeah. So, I need to develop what's called an athlete ear, the ability to hear what a coach is saying, have a level of trust that I'm just going to follow directions and him not saying, look at me, son, look at me in the eye. Tell me, acknowledge me because I'm more important. Like you're playing a power and status game as a coach right now. And as an athlete, you're fighting that power status tension, which you shouldn't be doing. So you need to develop trust within your coach and you need to have trust within yourself to say, I can hear you. And I could also show you that I could hear you by demonstrating the move or doing what you've told me to do in a timely manner so that he knows that you're now paying attention. And what ends up taking place is you develop an athlete ear and that becomes almost tunnel vision to the sound of what the coach is saying. Because the crowd noise is going to just drown all that out. I mean, I've never played in 100,000 person stadiums, but I played in 50,000 person stadiums. And, for those that played at Ohio State or Michigan or environments like that, where it's actually crazier, it's even louder and louder. But being in big stadiums with 50, 60,000 fans, I mean, it gets loud. And you can't really hear yourself think in some environments. What you have to be able to do is like get super dialed into that voice that you're going to pay attention to,
Yep.
which means you have to train yourself to hear a tone, a sound, anything like that. And that immediately comes into your brain. And then you go, okay, I now know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So that's the athlete's ear that I immediately think is like a high priority. The third thing is who and when to listen to outside of the game, right? Because there are constantly people telling you what to do, whether it be, the car ride home with your parents, or whether it be a coach, or whether it be your friend group or another teammate. And what I would say to that is you should be looking for people that have your best interest, number one. And then number two, you should be looking at people that understand where you are. And if they don't understand like what you're trying to do, then they're going to give advice that's contrary to what the outcomes are.
Mm.
And I take this to the fact that if you have ever watched any sort of pro sport on TV, all the time the person that's on there saying like, did you see this play? This is what they're supposed to do, but they're supposed to go over here. And as I watch that, I just want to like throw up in my mouth, because it's like, that's not exactly what's happening at all. Matter of fact, he's supposed to be there and you just shit on him on national television because you don't know what you're doing. And like, that was the play call. And this is why you just have to learn to like mute the people that are not in your corner.
Yeah.
You should be trying as an athlete to build a canoe, not a cruise ship. You're not trying to build an entourage and a party to people to go with. You're just trying to build a small group of people that have your best interest, and they're going to help you, because those are the people that you're going to listen to, and those are the people that you're going to ride with when it matters.
Yeah, no doubt. Unreal info, right? All across the board, nailed it across like different perspectives. Was this something that came to you intuitively when you were younger, or like, did you just kind of know it, and then as you got older, able to explain it? Like, how did you personally deal with those aspects of like, was there any challenges with that, or you just kind of knew that as you were coming up?
No, I think I take it to the fact that my dad was a firefighter when I grew up, and you get yelled at, and you don't like get emotional when you get yelled at, because it's like life or death. So I kind of learned really early on as an athlete and as a young coach, which was, I am agnostic to the process, but I'm religious to results.
Mm.
And what that means for me is I don't really care how we got there, as long as it's aligned with the integrity of the sport and the way that we operate within our values and beliefs. But I do care about the outcome. And there's something to be said of knowing your role. So as a young kid, I was able to do ride-alongs with my dad that most people would not be able to have access to. And I've seen some things that most people would probably never want to see, because he's in a paramilitary organization, emergency medical response, right? Pulling people out of buildings and caring for people that are in really bad accidents and crashes. But what you're able to watch is inside of the firehouse. I mean, they are shooting the shit. They're making fun of each other. They're having a great time. They're talking crap. And it's a lot of fun, to be honest with you. Like, they're just having a great time, saying everything that you could imagine back to each other.
Yep.
They're cooking dinner, they're having a good time, they're mopping up, they're cleaning. The minute that shit like was on the line, everybody knew their role. They're getting yelled at. This is what's going on. They're not like, hey, how dare you say that to me? Like, what? Like, there's none of that. There's actually like no tension.
There it is. Yep.
This is like, let's just go and do our job. Cool. Boom. And then they get back in, and they don't like drag, like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you do this? Like, they compartmentalize this thing, and then they get back into the firehouse, and then they're just like joking again. And then they get back out on the truck, and it's like, boom, something rings. You get an address, you go to what's going there, and it's like, hey, boom. It's like flipping a light switch and being like, I'm on and I'm off, and I'm on and I'm off. And this ability to do that, I think, is really important from a respect standpoint. I know my role, and I understand there's a hierarchy to that. And I take it to an analogy of, if somebody is going to argue with you about everything that you're trying to tell them, then they're not worth saving. Because it's like, if you're standing on the train tracks and I'm yelling at you, like, get off the train tracks now. Come on. And you're saying, well, why? I want to be here. Bam. And you're gone. And it's like, you do not have the luxury to argue in an environment where you don't have the perspective of, you don't know what's going on. So you either trust that person or you don't. And if you trust that person, then you know your role, and then you just do what they say. And then afterwards, we deal with the outcomes. Yeah. And I think this is something that's really important for me is as an athlete, I learned to follow coach's directions and be a really good athlete and a really good student. And then it's like sometimes I would do exactly what the coach would say and it put me in a worse situation. I'm just like, what the heck, man? Like every time I listen to this stupid coach, it puts me in a bind. I'm like, I don't like this. Like it makes me look worse than what I am. Yeah. So I started to learn how to what I call banging on the walls. How do I bang on the walls? How do I let's go? How do I make it look like I'm excited, I'm energetic, but I'm just like, all right, I'm chilling. Because vocally or energetically, I could look a certain way, but learn to just not put the effort in. And it's a skill that you have to learn to develop, to bang on the walls when the coach is telling you to do something. And it looks like your effort and intensity is there, but you're not physically bringing it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It's something that I learned in camps. When you go to an environment with a new coach, and it's like you don't want to be resistant because you want to explore. But if he's telling you to do something that you can't do, then it's a different thing. So I remember, I'll give you a good example is, so like Zach Thomas was a great linebacker for the Miami Dolphins, and he went to Texas Tech, super fast, but he's like stocky. You know, he's got a similar build to me. I think I'm a little taller than Zach, but not much, right? Like we're probably a similar size. And then there's a guy like Willie McGinnis, Derek Brooks. Like these guys are monster of human beings. Okay, Derek played for the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he played right next to a good friend of mine, Cato June. Cato is about my height and size, short, stocky, super fast, got great vision. Played at Michigan. Derek Brooks, massive human being. Willie McGinnis for the Patriots, massive human being. And I remember like Willie would be like, hey, like take that guy and just like all you need to do is like post your arm out here, keep that arm straight, and then just like shift him down. And I'd look at him like, you expect me to do that? Your freaking arm is twice the size of mine. Like we don't have the same tool set. You know what I mean? And Derek Brooks would say the same thing. He's like, hey, just push him down and like come around the guy. I'm like, by the time that he does that, he's in my face. And I'm getting down blocked by a 6'5", 330-pound offensive lineman, you know, and I'm over here 5'11", right? 6 foot on paper, by the way. You know, fun fact, nobody's 6 foot, but I'm 6 foot on paper. I'm getting down block at 235 against a guy who's 330. He's got, I have lower leverage than him, but he's got leverage coming down on me. I can't wrong arm the guy and then work into him. I just can't do that. And you have to know your own ability. So sometimes I used to have to sometimes take advice from people and be like, that ain't going to work for me. Right. You know, and you have to learn to go like, all right, that's just, God, I don't have it, you know? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had a really good, I'm very fast. I have a good eye for the sport because I grew up watching it, so I could feel the game, and I looked fast too on the film because I was a step ahead of everybody just from intuition and understanding the game. And I'd hit you hard, but if I had to backpedal or if I had to open up my hips, oh boy, did I look like my feet were like sunk into the mud. And it's just like sometimes you don't have the athleticism or the skill set to do some things. And you have to realize that there's levels to the game. Somebody out there has a higher level than you. You got to learn to play with what you have. And this is where Michael Jordan's probably not the best basketball coach. You got to know what your skill sets are and who to listen to. That doesn't mean you don't give it a shot. You want to be in an exploratory phase of your game, but that might be during the off season. And then you have to know who to listen to when. So I think it's really important. And in order to develop that athlete ear, you have to know your skill set. And if you don't know your skill set, then you need to figure that out.
Yeah, amen to that. And that's, it reminds me of a couple of things. You know, the first thing you said there is one of the things we always talk about as part of our mindset method is that identify strengths and challenges. Because being able to actually figure that part out is, you understand your nature. You're fully aware of both sides. And there's tons of research to back that up of we get so involved in, focus on your strengths. Of course, focus on your strengths. But the irony is that I've observed with a lot of players is when you ask them what they're strong at, they're actually very humble. And it's like, I'm pretty good at this. If you ask them what their weaknesses are, oh, they have a lot of confidence. I've always found that strange of that paradox of how can you be so confident about what you're weak at, but yet so quiet and shy about your strengths? And it brings you to a point, right? Of there's that other side of you being confident in, all right, I know what I'm not great at, but then it's what allows me to elevate what my strengths are. And that's the part for you is that clarity you're talking about. If you don't have that distinction in a way that's very neutral, that's very collected, of just like, matter of fact, this is the way it is. That's such a differentiator between great players and everybody else is the best players at highest levels. They have that ability to go, yeah, I'm really good at that. Nah, that's not me. Right? It's just like an automatic of mentally, I don't even need to think about that. Or, yeah, I just need to do enough of this to survive. But this is what they pay me for. This is what I am. And, I think that's massive right there, what you talk about in that lens. And then the other part too that I loved about it, and I'd love to hear your take, on your last part, but the exposure you got from your dad of being at that firehouse and being around that and just seeing in that realm and being in that environment where we're chill, we're hanging out, we're shooting the shit, we're giving it to each other. But when it's time to go, we go. I remember training one summer actually down in McNabb, out in Phoenix. I was with him. He was unbelievable at that. Like he was the biggest clown when we weren't going in the drills. He's joking around with everybody. But as soon as we started, it was like, whoa. Like he turned into another like super mutant where it was like, he is beyond dialed. And I just always appreciated that. I trained from it was like 6-7 weeks, but it was unbelievable to like watch that and see like, that's insane. And that point right there that you make, the importance of, clearly it was a skill set. Right? He struggled at other times when it was like big games and all that fun stuff. But the reality was to see him turn it on and off like that, to your point, is such an important skill set that you had exposure at a young age, which was unbelievable to bring that into your athletic life.
The reason why athletes tend to favor what they're bad at is because it's what they're always being told they need to work on. And in reality, what they should be working on is what they already have skill sets to be honing in and getting the best at. That's where you should be spending the majority of your time. So they're so confident with saying like, I'm really bad at that. I'm really bad at this. This is not where I'm strong, is because they're constantly being told that. So if you're in an environment like you're great at this, like double down on that. Like you should, if it's like gambling, like double down on what's working. Let me tell this to any athlete that's out there. And if you listen to one thing regarding how do you make it to the next level, is listen to this one thing right here. Is not only do you want to double down on what you're good at, but you've never got hired or slotted into a position because of what you were bad at. You've only made a roster because you could do something that the team needs. And that thing that you need is something that you're great at, that there's a gap in another area of the positions and or of the roster. So we are specifically putting you into this slot because you have the ability to strike from the outside, or you have this ability to kind of cut through the lane aggressively, or you're the ability to play defense, or you're an incredible person while you're on the ice. Something about it is you just learn to play the field really well. Or you're a striker on offense in soccer and you just know how to get a penalty. So like there's something about you that makes you great, that slots you into this roster. You've never got put on a next level roster because of something that you're bad at. We've never sat in, I've been in hundreds of freaking rooms as a coach. I've never sat in a room in a board of the meeting like, hey, we are going to take this kid because he sucks at this thing. So why the hell is it in your head?
Amen. Amen. I mean, and this is where, right, the paradox of leadership and why, and what I love about, and we'll dive into that as well from like, how you've transitioned, is that this is the part that I found is a big issue with leadership, to your point. If you keep hearing over and over again, what are we getting feedback on? People that didn't experience it, don't have that lens and ability to see, I'm going to go all in on what you're great at because I know in the future, that's how you're going to get hired in anything that you do. Your value, your natural, instinctive, God-given value is what people are going to gravitate towards. But instead, I'm going to yell at you and give you my perspective on here's what I think you need to do because my one lens, and I'm going to judge you, and my one preference is you should be this. Even though this guy over here, I kiss his ass because God forbid we don't win a 12U championship. I'm going to create a lot of nerve damage right now and make you feel like a fucking loser because I was a loser in a nutshell. And that's the part where right there, right, is like in leadership today, and this is where that, you start to cross-reference of why players get so stuck in that caveat, is that, yeah, most people in a calm setting like this will say, yeah, of course. Boom, yeah, hey, focus on strengths. Yeah, it's good, it's good. But as soon as we start competing, as soon as we start to get tension, we don't know how to manage that. As soon as we get stressed, we change how we think. That's mindset and mental performance 101. You're managing how to stay the same person, whether you feel like this right now or whether the heat is on. I'm still recognizing I'm going to keep thinking the same way no matter which way I turn. I've realized this is how I roll. This is the process. This is what I do. And to your point right there, that is such a challenge for so many people to understand, because there's the beer conversations, we're hanging out, everything's good. And then there's the, oh, it's time to go win, quote unquote. And that transition right there, man, is it's amazing to watch how challenging that is for so many leaders and coaches that are out there, and families and parents, to manage that, where you trust leaders, you think they're doing what's best, but because we can't just decipher what we're naturally great at and stick to that for kids, young adults, right, adults, it's amazing how much tension that creates in the ecosystem of performance world.
Absolutely. And you run into, like, what are we good at? Like, we're good at the things that we practice. We're good at the things that we like actually get a reward system from. So if we feel like we're getting some sort of benefit from doing this and we get any sort of recognition, then we're going to keep doing it. And if we keep doing it, then that feedback loop is going to tell me, like, I like this and I'm getting better at it, and then I'm getting rewarded for it. So the last thing you want to do is really just be like depressed because you're not good at something, when you have all of these other skills that you're good at that you should be honing in. There's just a time and a place to work on them. So I'll give you a great example for fighters as we prep for a fight camp. Is when we're going into a fight, we are really not trying to work on our weaknesses. We're going to protect ourselves. Like, we're going to manage insurance. So if we know that that hook's coming, then we're always going to make sure that if we're throwing a hook, like, what's the counter to a hook is another hook, right? And that's really important to know, because that's what they are going to do. And we're going to be working on all of our protections and hedging our bets and then counters attached to it. But whatever we're good at, whatever is our best thing, that's what we're going to be drilling in, because that's how we're going to win. In the off season, when we're not getting ready for a fight or we're not in fight camp, that's when we're really developing new skills. So there's a time and place to develop new skills. But while we're in season, we do not want to be distracted by way of something that's not our strength. We should only be distracted on saying, I already have this skill set. I just need to be able to express it within the strategy of the sport. Because there's seasons that I have and phases of a year in sport. And if you look at when we would break down kind of like the training programs, there is GPP, which is general physical preparation. Then there's SPP, which is specialized or specific physical preparation. Then there's preseason, so building up into that, right? And then there's like in season, okay? And that's in competition. So pre-competition and then competition. And then there's peaking, so playoffs, whatever those windows are, okay? So these are your 5 phases of a competitive season. In season, off season, what are you doing from a physical standpoint? And then you have like an integrated one, which is rehab, right? If you do get hurt during a window, you have to do that. The issue is that yearly cycle is different for everybody. So if I'm a fringe player, so if I'm in the league and I'm trying to make the roster, so in the NFL, if I'm trying to make a 53 and I'm a fringe guy, my peak better be preseason. But if I happen to be, a Landon Collins of the world that, like, in his prime, like, he's going to make the team. Sorry, buddy, that he's the stud. Do you know what I mean? And you start looking at all the guys that are like that, you start looking at like a first round pick quarterback. Like, he doesn't need to worry about making the 53. He's going to make it. So how he shows up, is important. But it's less important for him during the preseason, and it's more important for him to be just ready for competition. So your yearly cycle needs to be moved and calibrated based upon the intention that you have for that organization, how they make decisions, and where you stand. So you can't be on the team schedule because the team schedule isn't aligned with your schedule. You may not get the opportunity if you structure your off season based upon the team, because the team is structured on who are they paying the most money to, what ponies are they putting the most money on. That is how the team structure is set up. Their agenda doesn't align with your goals and your outcomes and your dreams and ambitions. So you need to make sure that you organize your yearly calendar to work on developing things in the off season. So when you come into preseason, they see that you've developed this kind of like hole in your game. And then now all of a sudden, if you have an incredible shot off the right side, and you could go long and you could do that, but you've never been able to basically pass and push to the left and to retreat quickly. If they see that you have that ability now, they're like, oh, where's that come from? And then all you tell them is you're like, now, mind you, probably honed in your best skill, but they already know you for that. All you have to do is be like, yeah, I've been working on it all offseason, coach. Amazing. You're taking my advice. You're listening to me. I feel important because I told you what you should be doing, and now I'm responsible for your career. Like, in reality, you're responsible for exposing a gap in my play. I'm responsible for closing that gap. And knowing when to do that is really important. And not doing it during the team's timeline, but doing it during your timeline is really critical for your success so that you even have an opportunity. Yep. The next thing to understand is like when you break down sport, right, you got kind of the areas of things, and you have like physical, like what are your physical capabilities? What is your technical capabilities? Like, do you have the technical skill? And then do you have the tactical, the strategy, the vision, the sight? And then the accelerator and integrator to those things is the psychological, because you're going to have a mindset approach to physical. You're going to have a mindset approach to technical. You're going to have a mindset approach to the tactical part and how you're approaching the game from those different angles. These are the things and tools that you have to build in your arsenal. And in each off season, there's a time and a place to work on them. And then when you're in season, it's predominantly dialing a little technical and mainly tactical, because you're not going to be doing too much physical other than being able to maintain what you've already built. And now if you're not a guy who's getting a lot of playing time, then you should be actually working on developing things physical while you're in season, because you can. So these are all very important things to think about when you're looking at kind of the global aspect of a professional athlete in their life cycle. And what we do is just, we want to make sure that we're listening to the right people, but more importantly, that we need to know in ourselves, taking an honest assessment of where we are. Like, I want a professional athlete to have two things. They need to be incredibly delusional about what they're going to accomplish and what they're trying to achieve, and insanely realistic about where they are. And if you understand that at the same time, where you're delusional about your long-term goals, but hyper realistic about what your current state is, you'll work on the things today that will close the gap long-term for the big picture.
Yep. Nailed it on so many levels. And what I love the most about was how you broke it up, and speaking to the psychological and mental performance aspect. Right there in the rhythms of the year, we tell our players all the time, in season, you're more focused on the collective. So in the hockey, as an example with the team, cognitively speaking, there's going to be a lot of work on systems, role development, conceptual, what they expect of you, right? Video work, watching opponents, how they play. So cognitively, there's only so much space. And then even college players, you've got to go to class. You've got all these other things going on, right? So there's a mixture of, cognitively speaking, there's a lot on your mind elsewhere where you don't have the time to focus in on, to your point. In the summer, so we have about 2/3 of our athletes will continue on through the summer. Some will take a break over the summer. Then we have about 2/3 that continue on. Why? Because what we're doing is we're helping them to ensure that physical, when you're in the gym, what specific language are you paying attention to? The cues that are important right now for you to pay attention to, whether you're squatting, lunging, whatever your strength coach is giving you, what cues do you need to pay attention to? Maybe you're working skills, right? So there's a technical aspect, right, to it where you have to pay attention to how your body's moving. But cognitively speaking, you have to be the one to decipher that language, keep it top of mind, and know that's the most important distinction right there for whatever I need to do, lower body, upper body, reframing, holding my body technically. That's your responsibility. But then tactically, it's taking, okay, what happened during the season? Now, if I'm going to get those reps in the off season, it's the same idea. Well, what situations exactly was I dealing with where this was a constraint? Why wasn't I able to create that? How do I work around that? Most of the time, and I've dealt with this so many times with players, I think of one example of a player I was working with. He's just going into the pro ranks now, but he was playing D1 college at the time. And it was crazy how he's working with a shooting coach. And we worked all year. We worked on, all right, when you're coming off the wall, you're going to cut to the middle, make a little fake, come out, fire the puck. Like, he was really good at it. You saw the pattern, you saw it coming out. So we were like, how do we create this more? And I was amazed how he starts working with the shooting coach probably about 4 or 5 weeks into it. And we're talking about the process. All right, how's things going? What are you working on? And he comes back to me and he lays out, he's like, yeah, he's got me working on this shot. I'm like, whoa, hold on. Tactically, what does that have to do with everything that we learned about your process? Not what this coach is telling you, who doesn't watch your video, who knows nothing about what you look like from a tactical standpoint in the game, is telling you what they think. What are you bringing to the table to let them know, hey, hold on, no. I need to get better at this because I understand when I'm in season, I'm going, these are the things I need to think about now, is how to make that better. Because during the season, I was struggling to think through that. But now I came to you as a professional, so you guide me to build that. And it was a cool moment for him because he realized quick, oh crap, what am I doing? And then after that, realized moving forward of what we meant by in the off season, you have to take care of the language in your head and the psychological part of, wait, you're going to go to these experts. They're going to tell you what they think naturally by just looking at you. But if they're not looking at you under game conditions and they haven't studied your patterns of the game conditions and they don't know how you think like that, they're just giving you stuff that's cool. It could potentially work, but this is the stuff that you already know about yourself. That's like, wow, I could 10X what I already do with this expert giving me the knowledge I need to fundamentally, from whether it's physical, tactical, right, technical information, but I've got to take the actual experience of the real world with me. And so it's cool how you break that down, of the importance of that right there, where, yeah, in the off season, it's a different framing. It's a different mindset than what we're focused on in season.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same thing when you look at like therapy. A lot of times the reason why therapy doesn't work is because you're lying on your back and on a couch, but yet when you're arguing with your significant other, it's never why you're lying on your back on the couch. And if that's happening, then good day to you, right? But normally what's happening is because it's right when there's moments when you're going to see these triggers when they first come into the house, or when you are going away to do something, right? Or when there's a midday window of like that person's doing something, they're not on the same page that you are, and they see you in a certain spot. That's when relationships normally are stressed. So there's triggers to them that are happening. So what happens is you're discussing the end product of the argument on the couch with a therapist, but you're removing the trigger. Well, then how do we understand, like, how did we get here? You don't get that because you don't have that pressure situation. You don't have that anxiety. You don't have the opportunity to actually to see it before it happens because you're sitting down stationary. And it's the same thing in sport. I find that sitting down in a chair and a couch, laying down, is the great for work moving forward. But reflection is better by yourself or in the same environment. So I find that like you're going to watch film study, right? Because you're putting yourself in that environment.
Right.
Or you're actually in that environment and you're working through, like, when I'm here, this is what I need to work on. So you're bringing the practice to the field, so to speak. Or if I want to then visualize my future, if I want to visualize what I'm going to be doing, that's a great time to do it stationary, because then I can start picturing in my mind's eye how the everything unfolds and what do I need to be doing. Because I can manifest it through my own vision. But when I play it in rewind, your body and your mind plays tricks on you. So if I were to tell you about the fight that you had or the performance that you had in sport or the game that that was great, or if you had explained to me what took place, you would tell it to me. Either close your eyes, tell me what happened, show me, like explain it to me in as much detail as you can. You would explain it to me. And then we would be watching the film, and it's very different than what you thought. But ironically, if I say, hey, I want you to visualize what you're going to do on game day, and you visualize it and you explain to me what you're going to do, it is more likely that the thing that never happened becomes more accurate than the thing that already happened, because it's happening in your head and you're creating the first picture, and then you're actually getting those kind of synaptic connections and neurotransmitters to like fire the way that you want them to, and then it almost manifests into the reality of that highlight film. And I find that to be fascinating when you look at therapy versus performance.
Yeah, no, it is. It's amazing, right? The context in that way matters, right? Like one of our other guests, Scott Livingston, he talks about this all the time, right? Of like how, context is king. And it's amazing, right? In the informational world that we live in, how much we don't realize taking experience. And then to your point, right? Even if something I didn't experience, but because of I have this grand vision of where I'm going to go, how that impacts great athletes or very high level athletes versus, the general public, everybody else, kind of how they interpret information, right? Because that's another context, right? Because you understand what it's like to be in the heat of a major environment. You're not imagining what it's going to be like. You had the exposure. You were there. So now your imagination's running wild in the context of, well, I was there, versus a lot of people are imagining what it'll be like to be there. And so that adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it. So I love how you broke that down, because it's challenging on so many levels. But again, like we said earlier, the exposure, your lens changes when you have the experience and you have it and contextual. And for our listeners, there's going to be some that can relate and say, oh yeah, in their minds, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about, but it's going to be a very different, right, lens of somebody in the youth world that's coming up that might be just starting out versus somebody that's professional, been around for a while. You're seeing it in two completely different lenses, even though it might feel like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. What you're seeing, the imagination piece, are literally two different realities. And that is so challenging, right, to work through.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, and I love, so as we're kind of going through, one of the things that, as we're looking at your career and kind of how you came up, one of the things I find fascinating, right, was how you started off early. So while you were still in school, you started your own first, sports performance company. So this is the transition phase out of the athletic and the coaching. And it was such a bold move, right? At a young age, I'm like, I'm going to go do my thing. What did you see in yourself? So when we talk about from the leadership standpoint, this is one of the things I respect the most about it, is that what did you see in yourself that made you take that entrepreneurial path instead of working, for someone else? Was that an instinctive thing that you had in you, or did early work experiences show you that you needed to build your own environment, or were you kind of doing a mix of both? Like, talk about what that looked like, from a leadership sense.
Yeah, I don't think it always happened that way either. So, for instance, I was still playing, and I got kind of forced into it because a friend of mine found out that his agent and trainer were stealing money from him. So he's like, hey, Cap, I trust you. If I'm going to call you at 2 a.m. because we're about to throw down, then I'm going to call you to help me with my career. So, your dad knew a thing or two. You've always worked out really hard. Let's go. So we just kind of figured it out. And my job at that point was like to not screw it up. So I went from not knowing anything and not screwing it up to that, all right, I have an obligation now. People are going to entrust their lives into my, hands, even if I was a small bridge to that path. I wasn't responsible for everything, but anything that I was responsible for, I wanted to make sure I did the best I could. And I knew how important it was to have people like that in my corner. So if I was going to be in someone else's corner, then I was going to go all in. And sometimes that's kind of the drive that you need. You find that in business, a lot of times people do better work for others than they do for themselves. And the minute that somebody was going to trust me, I was like, oh my goodness, I had to kind of go all in. So I had to go seek out people to learn from. And I was like, I got to learn the best. Now I leveraged my athletic ability. So when I went to go learn a lot of that stuff, I was like, hey, like I could throw a jab pretty far and I could hit pretty hard and I could move pretty good. And it's like, let me steal workouts, right? Let me go and learn from all these really cool people. And I did. I sought so many people out to do that. And there was so many moments where I would go to a workout and be like, that guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And I did that to, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I went to train with just to kind of experience it. And I go, my God, like big name, great accolades. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. And I knew it right away because as an athlete, I was battle tested myself. I knew what was good technique. I knew what worked and what didn't. And I understood like that shit ain't like if there was a trainer telling me, oh, when you do this and you come up to the line, this is what you're going to do. And I'm just like, that's not how it works at all. Like I've been playing ball my entire life. I've been in NFL locker rooms since I was a kid. I've been in environments at the college level when I was in middle school, like just being around some of these coaches. Sorry, but my high school coaches are in the Ring of Honor in Alabama and played 10 years in the NFL. My high school position coach played 10 years in the NFL, coached 15 years in the league. So I'm sorry, but I kind of think I know a little bit, So I knew really quickly, like, what was the bullshit meter to people. And I would go and just kind of steal workouts, understand what was going on. And then I started to gravitate to the ones that I thought were like, wow, you have unlocked something from me that I didn't even think existed. And the minute that somebody would kind of like show me something from a different perspective or like really double down, it's like you have confirmation bias. So they double down on something that I already knew. I just couldn't explain it well. Then I really just like dove into it. And then, so I was in parallel, like training, playing in my career and working with athletes because it was also like I needed to make money too, and as a student athlete nowadays, with all the NIL deals and the crazy world that it is, I would have cleaned house too. Oh man, I would have cleaned house. I was a great speaker, right? I was like the poster boy of like captain, right? I was like, I could say the right thing.
We wouldn't be here right now. You'd be retired, bro.
Oh goodness, I'd have made it kill it back. So, and the other thing too is like, I could talk a lot of shit. Like I grew up in an environment where like, that's what our boys did. We always like just talk bad crap to each other. So it was really easy for me to like kind of be in that environment. So nowadays I would have cleaned house. But what happened in that process of me, like learning as a coach is I was getting better as an athlete. And then I fell through a roof, 25 feet, broke my back, L4, L5, T1, changed my life. And I always thought I was going to, like, the truth is I used to tell the story of like, I fell through a roof, broke my back. And then I realized that God had better timing for me and I went to go coach. But the reality of it is that is a condensed version of the truth. The truth is that I fought for about a year easily to go back. And I just didn't have it in me physically to make it. And when you realize that, that's hard is because it's like, you tell the stories all the time of, well, if I was good enough, I would have made, or if I didn't get hurt, I would have made it. And like, the truth of it is like something about it. It wasn't in the cards. My body failed me. I couldn't make it happen, but at the end of the day, like say what you want, but I just wasn't good enough. You could say what, like, I could tell you like, yeah, I was All-American, but like to get paid at the highest level, I just wasn't good enough. And that's a hard reality that I have to accept, even though I still believe I still could play. But that's just somebody else's decision. And I knew that I had to do something about it. So for me, I got fast tracked into coaching, and along that path into coaching, I had to be like, if I'm going to pour something into it, like I'm going to do something 100%. Like I never dabbled. And I think this is something I never did in anything. Like I would quit things if I wasn't going to be the best at them. Like I enjoy basketball, but I'm never going to play basketball. I wrestled and played football. How good of a basketball player I am if you just know what those athletes are like in those other sports. So I just tend to be attracted to things that I'm going to naturally be good at because like you understand, like once you're starting being around it at a high level, it's a different game. Right. So I think like fastest I was like a 10.8, and I think that's really fast personally when I look at like my speed. But when you start realizing that people are running a second faster than you in the real world of like where it really matters, you're like, all right, that's not for me, and you just like, you got to put things in perspective. I think I have told you this story about, being on the ice with one of my Penguin players, and they're like, oh, Cav, you're going to get on the ice and you're going to work with us. They're like, hell yeah, man. I love fucking scales. I grab a stick and I get my blades on. I'm out there and I'm like feeling pretty good. And then they come full speed at me and stop on a dime 2 freaking inches away from me. I literally took my skates off on the ice and walked out of there like I was a little kid. No, thank you. I'm done. Sorry, guys, not happening. Because there's levels to this game, and unless you realize there's levels to the game, then you're just delusional.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I could skate. Yeah, I could hit a puck, and yeah, I could do that. I could pass, and I could have fun with you guys. And then you get on the ice with those guys, and you're just like, oh damn, this is a different level.
Mhm.
And you have to understand that, and you have to respect that.
Yes.
So, I think oftentimes the people that don't respect it they're in the middle, but like they're not in the beginning because they look up to it, and they're not at the end because they would have enough perspective and they would look back and they're like, yeah, they're in the middle. And it's interesting because in my coaching career, I still consider myself young after 2 decades being in the space. I think I'm a baby, but you realize like, now not having hair and not having I call it a 5-pack because I never really had the shredded abs. You realize that, you have enough experience in there to know, like what you're good at. And I think that people like in the sense of like, if you want to get good, there's people that look up to me and are like, Cav, like you're the best at what you do. You're a genius. And those are the babies. Those are the people that are just getting started. They're like, oh my God, like the gap is so big between where they are and where I am. And they see that and they're like, wow, you're a genius. The people that are in the middle are like, they're too caught up with their own success to realize what they don't know. And they're like, oh, I think I have a better way. They start arguing with me or they start debating me. And I'm always game for a good debate. But I don't know why we're arguing with someone who's got no experience or no results. Like you're arguing with me with something that you've never done. I've been doing this for 20 years with results for 20 years. Like for fuck's sake, I think I got enough medals to show it. So it gets annoying after a while, but these are the people that are in the middle that are having some success. And then the people at the end, the people that are older, the people that are in the same circles that we're in, they're like, wow, Cav, like, we appreciate, we recognize what you've done. We consider you, very successful. Like you've kind of understood, you've deconstructed how to win in any environment. And you've been able to help people get to that point and win. And I'm a big believer of like, look, we're going to help you get to that medal position. We're going to help you, get on top. And the only way that we're going to do that is by being honest with ourselves about what we're trying to accomplish and where we are. And we really don't listen to a lot of the people in the middle. I think there's a lot of people that listen to people that are not where they want to be. I think the world listens to losers, and losing doesn't give you anything in life. Like there's no momentum in losing.
Yeah.
Other than more momentum in the wrong way. So I don't know why people don't listen to people that tend to win. They listen to people that are loud.
It's funny. I've thought about this quite a bit on that side of like the challenge, right? Like, so a simple example is it's so funny how locally it's so hard for people, like, because they might know me from being a kid and they have this judgment. And it's always like weird of like working with guys locally has always been challenging, but then you go outside and it's like, look at the guys, look who I'm part of. Like, it's crazy of how like the challenge on that side of like, why local is so weird of like, what is it? And it hits me of like, to your point of like, I think what ends up happening with all this process of why so many people listen is because very few, to your point earlier, hitting that stage of greatness takes one to know one. You can't recognize it. So most people, because they haven't been exposed to it, they haven't been around it enough. They haven't trained around it. They haven't been a part of it. They haven't been in conversations. That's not what their level looks like. Well, then they're going to be open to listen to everybody in the middle because, well, this person did this. Oh, this person did Division I, and this person, had this, and this. Oh, well, if their kid did this or this coach did that, it's instantly, as opposed to, well, wait a second, let me look at the body of work. Let me really understand who I'm dealing with. To your point, replicated, has been consistently in that environment. It's a different animal. Whereas people coming up, because they don't have the consistent exposure and they don't know, they start trying to listen to everybody. And that's kind of that silo in the middle is, it's everyone just fueling everybody, and I don't know who to believe anymore, But recognizing someone that's legit, you and I can go walk in and know in 5 minutes, all right, for Daisy or, go ahead, real deal.
And I think part of it is also the gap. So in my experience, one thing that I've noticed is that the further the gap is, the less likely they are to admire or look up to that person. And the reason why is because it's less likely that they could achieve what that person that they would be looking up to could achieve. And so they find somebody that's closer to them in the gap so that they could be like, well, if they could do it, I could do it because they're closer to them. Now, I don't think anything that I have is different or special than what anyone else have, other than the DNA that my parents gave me and the environment, and which you guys can't have. But you have your own set of circumstances that are quite unique to you that has better leverage than mine. And I think what separates me from most everybody is my ability to fail in the shadows, so that when my foot's on the line or the athletes are under the lights, we learn to win. And most people are willing to win only when other people are watching behind closed doors, because it's like this self-satisfaction of I'm winning in practice. And it's like, if you're winning in practice, you're going to lose when it matters.
Right.
But if you learn to fail fast behind closed doors and you take fast feedback, when you step on the line, you will win. This is a mindset that is so different than everyone else. And I have a hard time comprehending why you would argue with this, because in 20 plus years, this has been the one thing that is proven for our athletes to win. And I've done this in many different sports, not just in one discipline, where I am the head coach. And I'd say this: when I first started, I'm lucky to have mentors that are 20, 30 years older than me. And today, some of my mentors are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's incredible. And I really love them to death. And I still consider myself a baby. Today, I still hold those same mentors. I've had great relationships with them and they've been great. But today I have mentors that are 50s, that are 40s, that are 30s. And I have a kid right now that's 25 years old. 25 years old. And I think he's a mentor that I'm looking up to, because he's doing something in his life that is better than the thing that I'm doing in my life. And I look at them as a lighthouse and I say, okay, I want that thing from them. I don't need everything from them. So you have to learn to do that. And age is not the factor. Experience is the factor.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and that's kind of hits on one of the things I want to close out with you. But, talking about that part of like one other, piece of the lens that I think is really important for you is the transition you made where you were going teaching athletes and then you went into teaching coaches. Talk about what that experience has been for you, right? Where, shifting from training athletes to mentoring coaches, it's a different animal in a lot of ways, right? And so when you think about that, what's different about your approach with the coaches compared to athletes? And then when you think about, who you choose to mentor, what are those qualities that you look for in the kind of coach that you want to work with? Because I'm sure we're specific towards that as well.
Absolutely. And I think you have to be, in order to serve them well, because if you take everybody, you're not going to be able to, you don't know what your own language is. So my kind of evolution from athlete to coach was different from coach to coach. So the one from athlete to coach was like, hit the ground, that shifted quick, right? That was God's timing, along with his sense of humor too. But that one from coach to coach was a little different, where I realized at a young age in coaching, where I had, I didn't grow up with money. My parents provided me with everything. So I think I was very wealthy, even though we weren't rich. We had an incredible life growing up. Even though that where we grew up, my parents argued every day about money. And I learned that I was coaching athletes that their dads would call me and be like, hey, I want to talk to you all the time. And I'd like flip in my mind for a second. I would overhear another conversation where they're trying to get in touch with one of my clients' father. And they would like beg for these calls. And I'm like, I could call him in 2 seconds. That motherfucker will pick up, And I realized something that was interesting. These guys are super successful, like incredible property managers, running companies, millionaires on the Forbes list, very, very successful, like incredible human beings, incredibly intelligent, incredible at what they do. And they've managed this entire portfolio of properties and assets. And yet I control the greatest asset that they own, which is their kids. Now I better hold that with a high regard. And I did. Like, it was a big deal to me, and it still is to this day, to hold that level of respect. But then I started to like give them some insights and be like, I look at it through this lens. So I started to have that conversation with people at that level, people that are running $1 million businesses, $1 billion businesses. And I was giving them the same insights that I would through sport. Right. And what ended up happening is like, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And they would say, you know what, because I don't know enough that I think that that's a dumb question. I ask the stupid questions because I want to learn, but I say, well, I would approach it this way. Again, no skin in the game, but I would be like, this is the angle that I would approach it. And they would be like, that's smart. And the reason why that was smart is because I'm not lost in the shuffle. I'm not getting stuck in the industry know-how. I'm not getting stuck in the industry language. What I'm getting stuck in is the actual framework of how to win. And when I deconstruct their decision-making process has losing patterns and behaviors. So if I just deconstruct it like it was a sporting event, I needed to manifest this to be able to win on the podium and to win when it matters. I would actually take the framework out and I'd be like, you're making bad decisions. Why are you making bad decisions? Well, you're making decisions based on patterns, expecting a different result. You need to take the rock out of the shoe. Like, you need to hedge your bet here. And it's just like, it's not business. It's the decision-making of a winning framework. And I didn't even know how valuable that was until much later, because they started saying, oh, I did that. And then this happened. And then you're starting to see this like 2 decisions that were coming out of like and then I'm thinking to myself, oh God, like, you imagine if I made a multi-million-dollar mistake, you know? So I started to understand that. So I started to teach the same strategies and tactics that I taught to get athletes on the podium, executives in the boardroom. And it really became fun for me to be like, wow, I could actually impact this greater. I could make some, impact out of it. And then I started to build my brand behind that a little bit. And then I realized, well, isn't it more powerful for me to help other people build their brand so that they don't lose clients to their competitors just because they're not known? Because the first fight that your audience is fighting is who to listen to. Right. And I would much prefer for them to learn and listen to the right person. And oftentimes they're listening to the wrong person because they're listening to the loudest person. So I have a philosophy of be loud, because the world needs to hear from the right people at the right time, and you don't get to determine when the timing is. Right. So that's kind of how I made this kind of transition from athlete to coach, and then from coach to coach. And now I'm basically trying to lift up the people that are doing the right things, because I really want to help people win the right way. Because I think there's a lot of times you could win the wrong way, but I really want to help people win the right way, because there's an integrity line in business. I think the biggest difference between business and sport is where the integrity line is. In business, you choose your integrity line. And in sport, it's decided for you. So if you break the rules, if you cut corners, if you screw people over, if you cheat, it will be your reputation. You'll be penalized, or you'll have that reputation forever. In business, if you screw somebody over, you're going to high five a guy, at the bar the next day because you got a really good deal. And that's when you choose your integrity line. So I just would push this out to everybody that's in business is, you decide where your integrity line is. You choose your integrity line, because in sport, they choose it for you. And that's a big difference between the two. And I would much prefer that. I wish business is a team sport, but it's still a business. So you get to you could cut corners and screw people over, where if it was truly sport, it would be a universal language.
Yep.
But it's not a universal language. Business is chosen by the person in power and status.
Oh, yeah. Well, and to your point, you and I know better than anyone of like how, the pro sports route. It's amazing how the differences between player and then front office stuff. And just, it's like pretty wild to see, man, of like everything you just described of like, I've talked to many people in management about how, why don't we teach the players about the business end? And to your point, that's why, because you can get away with overselling and making things sound amazing on the one side, but you can't fake it on this side. On that side, you can fake it. It's crazy. It's wild.
Why would they want to do that though? Like, why would a organization that's $1 billion organization want to teach the people the business aspect so that they have more power and more control?
No,
they wouldn't. Like, stay in your role, stay in your place. I think that you have an obligation as an athlete to understand that you are a business. Your body is a business. So for instance, I have athletes that invest well over 6 figures into their body per season.
Mm-hmm.
But how much are you investing into your mind that controls your body?
Bingo. Bingo.
That might be a really important thing to evaluate when it comes to line items, because, you know, investing 6 figures into into your body, because your body's your business, isn't really a far-fetched thing. Most athletes understand that that's important.
Right.
But when they like, oh, like my mind controls my body, that might be a little bit more important to actually make sure that you're in the right framework. That's why I wouldn't do in season or off season. I could do more in season because of the needs, but off season's the window to actually have the most, like you could do the most work. So like I like to do like compressed camps during the off season, or like 2 week windows, and then give them their space and let them go on vacation and chill. But in season, it's like, I want to do that and get the work done.
Yeah. Love that, man. Love that. It's and that's one of the things I'm so grateful about, being able to work with you too, of, going through this process. And to your point, right, from that line of understanding, how can you help the world out? And it's cool that, how we kind of met and went through this process was pretty sick, of just like normal conversation, exposure in another environment, and then just boom. It's just like, oh, gravitated, and then bam, here we are. And
I'll be honest with you, it was the hair. The hair's what did it. Yeah.
that's all it took, man. Thank you, Amy.
Well, I appreciate you. I think the world needs to hear from the right people and good people, and I think the difference here is most people don't know who the right ones are, because the ones that are winning are quiet because they're working. If you're winning, then you're working.
Yeah.
And what happens is the people that are losing are loud because they have a lot more time on their hands, because they're not dissecting what it means to be great.
Yeah.
And somebody like yourself deserves to be out there purely because that's a much better framework and methodology than if they weren't in your corner. So I always look at it as simple as this, like, okay, like the people that are at the top of the bell curve, right? The ones that are in the front that are doing well, like what are they doing?
Right.
I want to deconstruct that. And it seems to be a consistent pattern that the people on the top of the bell curve have this guy in their corner like you that are helping them. Don't you think that would be really, smart to be around?
No.
And that's what I kind of implore a lot of people to do, because I think it's very valuable.
Yeah. I love that. I love it.
Thank you so much, man. This is great. Always good chat with you. Always good to kind of like, it fills my cup, because I know that there's people doing good in the world and doing the right thing, and using sport as a way to transform lives.
Yeah. Amen, man. Amen. Well, and same, thank you so much, for being on the show and, sharing your story. Obviously the depth of the journey, the way you've navigated these transitions and the wisdom that you shared today. It's just unbelievable. And it's gold, man, on so many levels. So incredible to hear, man. For people listening, where's the best place for them to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the most active on social platforms. So Coach Cav, KAV, and you can reach out to me anytime. If you're looking on the sport side of things and you're really just trying to understand where you fit at the executive or athlete level, then it's athletehq.com. If you're in the personal branding or business space and you're really trying to grow and scale that, sitesatscale.com. And what we've just done is taken the same strategies and tactics that's worked with athletes to, get them to an elite level, to work with executives and business owners so they could have the entrepreneur journey and entrepreneur success that an athlete has. Because there's nobody handing you a medal if you do really well in business. There's nobody handing you, an award if you get on the podium. But there are people that have your back, and that's probably the best reward, in my opinion, is to do right by people, have a good bottle of wine with people that are supporting you. I think that's how we celebrate. And I kind of want to honor that and that group of people. And that's what we do to this day. If I could ask for one favor for everybody listening is, I get people that reach out to me all the time. I feel like a jerk sometimes if I can't get back to them, because it's flooded with inbox of spam and other things that happen. But the easiest way to kind of identify, like to reach out, is to be persistent. And if you just go on this episode, give it a review and write what like the biggest takeaway was, even if you thought like, hey, I was full of shit, I don't care. And the greatest compliment I ever got was from my doctor that's been around me. He goes, Kavanaugh, you talk a lot of shit. Look, you're not full of shit. I was like, that's the greatest compliment you could ever give me. I appreciate that. But if you could just leave a comment and a review for the podcast of like what you got out of this from Vinny and from myself, and then send that to me, I would be more than happy to, even connect with you as best I can, because I think that's how that's an easy ask. That's it. That's your ticket to entry, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, again, thanks again, brother. And for everyone tuning in, remember, play for that feeling, keep evolving as an athlete in your own life. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, share with a friend. As Kevin said, right, give the information back, and keep following along with the Evolving Athletes podcast. We'll see you next time.